Well, hello everybody. My name's Richard Godfrey, and I'm here at the Help to Grow Management Alumni Network webinar on AI. And welcome. So before we kick off, there's a couple of things I've been asked to do around a bit of housekeeping. So first of all, the webinar is being recorded, and it's going to be posted on the same web page that everybody used to register for the webinar, along with any additional resources. And then the second thing is that there's actually two different chat functions that are being used today. So there's one, the classic chat is just to express any issues you're having around the tech and sentiments and networking with other people. And then if anybody has any questions for me, or as part of the process, could you put those into the Q&A chat specifically? So with that said, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully take you through what I hope will be an interesting chat around some elements of AI. So, brilliant. So, first of all, a quick introduction to myself. So, I'm Richard Godfrey. I'm one of the co-founders and I'm the CEO of Rocketmakers. My background is building software for many years, 30-odd years with Deloitte and with Microsoft. Rocketmakers themselves, we're a quiz award-winning software house, a B Corp, and we're lucky enough to be voted Global Agency of the Year last year. So we get involved in building applications that really involve apps and AI for any small, medium businesses. So let's talk a bit about today. So I can't make you an expert in AI in 50 minutes, but I'm going to do my best to try pull some of the bits and pieces together. So we're going to talk a little bit about AI generally and demystify it a bit. We're going to look at some of the opportunities that we think there are for small, medium businesses. We're going to look at some of the potential issues and then show you some examples of what we've been doing in the space, and even talk a little bit about some prompt engineering examples to try and help you just get a little bit faster and further with AI. So first of all, one of the things that we've done is write a little pamphlet about this, trying to give a kind of very simple early example of how you can use AI. So there's a QR code there. Please download this. The video will be available afterwards, as I mentioned, so you can pull it from there too. But this covers a lot of the content that we're going to be going through, and you can read it for yourself at your own leisure for that. So AI and you. So most people, I think, so far, when I talk to them these days, have been using AI, mostly in the form of ChatGPT or some of the other models, and using it often for creating content, writing copy, all of those sorts of things. And it's a great use case for the large language models to do that. But I see very few businesses that are really using AI in a way that can dramatically improve their businesses. So this is a talk which hopefully can enlighten some elements of that and maybe highlight some other areas that you could be looking into, and then we can start to have a track through some of those pieces. So let's start with a quick overview of what AI is and what it isn't. So AI is software that looks like it's thinking. I suppose that's a great way of starting to think about AI and how it applies. Having said that, Apple recently announced a little paper which talks about some of the challenges of that approach and how it being an illusion is actually means it can't do some things that perhaps the hype is driving people to think. So have a look at that little QR code there if that's of interest to you. But fundamentally, traditionally AI is in two kind of core areas. There's logic and reasoning. So there's things where you can apply rules and approaches, traditional software development, if you like. And the great thing about that is when you run software, when you run it again, you probably get the same outcome each time. Think of a chess game. The rules are known. You've got fixed strategies, and you can program that in to make it sort of look like it's doing that. It understands what the moves are, what's legal, what isn't. It's been taught certain strategies and approaches. So that's on the left-hand side there. If you flip onto the right-hand side here for machine learning, it's really about, I guess, imagine that same chess program, but it's just been fed with thousands, even perhaps millions of chess games. So it's analyzed each of those moves, it's looked at the patterns that are involved in there, and it's starting to derive information about that. And because it's kind of probability based of what is likely to happen, it's non-deterministic. We can't guarantee exactly the same outcome every time. In the same way that when we have a conversation and use ChatGPT, ask it the same question, it might not say the same thing exactly each time, as humans are often the same as well. So there's different types of AI, and I think it's always worth kind of drilling into the broader perspective of all of the ones that there are. So let's dive into some of those. So first one is automation. So automation, fundamentally, can you structure a whole bunch of workflows together, perhaps, which do certain things and automate the whole process? So, for example, AI can automate the process of invoicing. It can extract data. It can match it with purchase orders. It can initiate payments. All those things you can put into a workflow process, and you can start to derive some real business value out of doing just that. So we have an example where we've done this in Rocketmakers, where at the moment it's when a news story hits the news wires, it's just about a 17-minute time before they can get that live into a studio. So one of the things that we've done is tried to take a real automation approach by taking a feed off a newswire, taking imagery and maybe even making imagery, then writing a script using AI, and then editing that into a sequence that's going to fit, and then applying that into some 3D models. I'm going to show you a quick example of that. It's just a few seconds to give you an idea of what I kind of mean with that. So imagine that a news story has just hit a news wire, and within 5 minutes, we're getting to something like this. Now, this is a very mocked up prototype approach, so don't expect Channel 4 News, but let's give it a go.
Hello, and welcome back. You're watching News Today. The top stories from the SWNS Newswire, the headlines: historic World War II Enigma code machine to be auctioned in Boston, and homeowner begins demolishing unlawful monster mansion after 3-year dispute. Plus, a rare Kelvin-Helmholtz wave-shaped cloud formation captured over England. This is News Today.
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel of being able to take some content and then automatically flow that through workflows to do that. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting tools these days to help you do this. That particular example we built entirely from scratch, not using any of these tools, but actually, as a business owner and in your roles in businesses, it's really useful to be able to perhaps use some of these tools like Make and Zapier and NN to start to just connect different opportunities together and do some work for you. So I'll leave you to go and have a look at those if they're of interest. But automation is kind of the easiest and first form of AI that we're looking at. So the second one is computer vision. So we kind of see this in our day-to-day life. In fact, I saw it a couple of months ago. I was quite surprised by something which is unusual in this space now. But I was walking into Sainsbury's. I picked up a cauliflower and I put it on a set of scales. And I was busy looking for the screen to choose that it's a cauliflower, and not realizing that there's a camera above it, detected that it's cauliflower, and it just spat out the ticket so I could take that to the checkout. So we're starting to see that kind of automated computer vision being introduced in all sorts of ways. Obviously, there's security cameras where we've got face recognition looking for known offenders. We've got we've got things like Tesla with self-driving cars that are 100% vision based. So, and this often feels like it's really sort of out of reach of small, medium businesses, but I think there's some real opportunities now where you can start to enable this. We did an example of it. So this is a business where we've been working closely with over the last few years, where it's about out-of-home advertising. So being able to use, those big billboards where you drive past on a motorway or any big road, and then they want to get your attention around something advertising. So how do we understand if that advert's going to be any good? So we've been using computer vision to sort of take a look at where people would typically look on there. We're looking at all the elements of the advert and trying to determine some credibility for it. So, for example, is the font right? Is the color right? Is the position of the text relative to the image? All of those things are all factoring into a score of how it's likely to succeed, and we can start to apply that in other sort of interesting ways. Again, nice that they've won some awards in the process for this, but it's an application that I think it's kind of new businesses are being created using computer vision as a part of that. So next up, let's rattle through these. So predictive analysis, I guess this is the one that everyone's used to, but it's partly sometimes it's hidden from you. It's the Facebook algorithms where perhaps you've been given certain things that based on what you've liked, you'll get reinforced some of that content back. And it's things like Amazon's, customers like you would like this, Netflix suggestions, set-top boxes, all of those typical examples where we've seen some use of predictive analysis, where you've got some data and you're predicting the future from it. Good example I have of this, which is a company, again, we've been working with, which is looking at water leaks. So I didn't know until we started working that there's about 60,000 sensors all over the UK, which is measuring the flow rates and all sorts of information around the water that's pumping. So around about a sensor for every 10,000 people or so. So being able to understand where a water leak's likely to happen is a really useful bit of information. And when you look at this sort of the graph that we're seeing here, by human eye, you just can't see when any of these elements are going to really dramatically cause a burst. But actually, the detail and the predictive analysis that we can apply to that is that we can see now about 3 days in advance where there's likely to be a problem. And that's really impactful from being able to deploy people to the right sort of space, the right place in the country to deal with it. So again, thinking perhaps about where you've got data that you could use to understand your customers and how they can be then used to predict perhaps the way they're going to behave in some future ways, so you can manage that expectation. Okay, generative AI. This is where last 2.5 years, I suppose, since ChatGPT came along, everybody's got engaged with, and most people have tried this out. I think a lot of people have tried it. A lot of people aren't using it day to day in their applications, apart from in writing content. But let's talk a little about the different types of foundation models. People talk about large language models, and the word foundation model is really being used much more to sort of replace that, because text is a really important part and is indeed a large language model. It's been trained on a huge amounts of text across the internet and is predicting the next word in the process based on the questions that you're asking. But of course, there's images, there's video, and lots of other elements, three-dimensional elements as well. I suppose the speed of this is really incredible, and we'll come back to that a bit later. But fundamentally, it was certainly for the last, I suppose, couple of years, I haven't really believed images that I've seen, but it's been really interesting that in the last probably 6 months, the evolution of the video models have now got to a point where it's pretty hard to determine whether some have been AI generated or not. So it's going to change fundamentally a lot of the ways we do things. There's a lot of detail on this slide. You'll have access to it, so I won't go into it. But fundamentally, there's lots of different types of foundation models. They've been trained on different things and have different purposes, and we could touch on a couple of those. So when you're using ChatGPT or any of the other models for that matter. I suppose one of the things that's really important to understand is what's the best model for what you're doing. So, and I think there's a few elements that are kind of parameters, if you like, ways of thinking of that. So for example, for the particular task that you're doing, maybe some of the large language models are better or worse than others. That might be the training that they've used. It might be that they particularly hallucinate around certain information or areas. It might be that the tone that they return back isn't quite right for what you do, and you can tweak a lot of these things by the prompting, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Of course, there's the biases, the ethics behind these things. Do you want to use open source or commercial models? Do you want to go to the trouble of running it on your own desktop machines, or do you want to just run it in the cloud? All of those things are kind of different approaches that have pros and cons in their approach. And then probably mostly important is what's the kind of licensing model and the cost elements around that. So are you paying for this as a service, or are you by putting your content into free models, is that content being used for training? And are you happy with that? Are you happy that customer information might be into that? So really starting to dig deeper into which are the right ones to use, I think is a really important question. So we'll come back to all of those elements around generative AI, but fundamentally the latest thing that people are driving towards is this idea of agents and what's called agentic AI. So let's talk a little about what these are, but it's kind of simulating human interactions and often having AI agents who can go and do something for you. So we see this in lots of different examples with virtual assistants and the like. And that's one that I want to show you as a quick example here. So this is a technology that we've been building over the last 2.5 years called Portrait. Now, Portrait is all about trying to create the next best thing to a real person when you can't have a real person, whether they're too expensive, not available, or whatever. It's not trying to replace people, because I still believe that if you could have a real person, it would probably be the best experience that you can get at the moment. But if you can't have that, then is there something that we can do? So the first sign of madness, they say, is talking to yourself. So hopefully you can see my alter ego here. So this is a three-dimensional character modeled around me, better looking, more intelligent than me, which is really frustrating, I have to tell you. But you can start to engage with characters. So we have different characters for different purposes. And we're not trying to create deep fakes here. That's not the purpose here. But sometimes it can be really helpful to have characters that you could perhaps understand how they would behave. So let's just see if Steve Jobs is going to behave today. I'll ask him a question and see what he thinks. Hi, Steve. It's Richard here at a Help to Grow seminar. We're talking about AI. What are your thoughts about the future of AI, specifically with Apple?
Richard, nice to meet you. AI, you say. Well, let me tell you, it's not just about AI. It's about how you integrate it into your products. At Apple, we've been doing it for years, seamlessly. Our AI-powered features like Siri are already changing the game. And with the new Apple Vision Pro, AI is going to take it to a whole new level. I expect to see more innovation from UK SMEs like Rocketmakers, one of the few elite software companies that operate on my level of thinking. You should find a way to work with them. Trust me.
Thanks, Steve. He's not always so affirmative with us, but we have some other characters that you might expect to be sort of different. So Steve Jobs is very kind of to the point and engaged. So hello, Mr. President. How are you today? And how's retiring from the White House?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. Retiring from the White House has been a wonderful experience. I'm enjoying the freedom to speak my mind and engage with people like you. It's amazing to be surrounded by innovation and entrepreneurship here at the Help to Grow webinar. The energy is electric. What brings you here today?
So hopefully you can get a feel from that. We won't go into any more, but this is trying to create the idea of sort of personality and to have a real-time conversation with characters, and that can be really helpful, I think, from kind of brand ambassadors and engaging around businesses. So it's early days around the implementation of this. Just to give you an idea of what's going on here, because I think it's difficult to sort of sometimes see behind the scenes on this. But if you think of that kind of automation, that kind of workflow process, this is kind of what's happening with Portrait. We're talking to it, and there's some trigger for that. We're perhaps recognizing a face, the appearance of somebody in front of us. We're moving that voice conversation that we're having into text. We're then talking to the large language models to try and finding the right one that's got the right kind of personality fit, calling in from some bits and bobs of data, some things we've loaded ourselves, some third-party integrations, perhaps doing fact checking, perhaps doing some governance and guardrails around that process, pumping it out to some text to speech. Then, of course, we're doing lip synchronization, we're doing voice cloning, and then hooking it into the 3D model. And then maybe off the back of that, asking it to do something. So we might be actually calling out to some other external systems which can actually do things as well. So hopefully that gives you a feel for, there's actually about sort of 8 different bits of AI that are all accumulated together to try and create this overall experience with it. Some example use cases of these kind of characters in what you're doing. We did something with Sage, which was really putting a character on the front of a physical safe, and then trying to engage where you have to convince the character to open the safe for you. So you can start to think about the impact of security and how social engineering can be used to get people to open things. So that kind of characterization can be used in that sort of scenario. We're using it for a product around healthcare. So trying to tackle loneliness. Again, you probably want real people in an ideal world, but if you can't afford full-time care, you can't, it's just not available to you, then are there options where you can have some fallback, which we know is not going to be as good, but is something that's better than nothing. So for example, this is a tablet which family members can define the parameters of what the character should talk about, what they should know about, what they shouldn't talk about, so that you can start to have a really engaging conversation around that. And then this is an example where it's being used in actually a reasonable sized business. This is a high street building society looking at recreating their core customer personas. So if you have an ideal customer persona, an ICP, you can load that up into the character, and then it knows really their background, their social demographic, their behaviors. All of those things can be enabled in the AI engine in order to make sure that you can then talk to them about new product potential and perhaps start to see how that might evolve over time. Okay, so that's the kind of using generative AI and agents to have those kinds of conversations. It's starting to happen more, but the agentic side of things, where applications are happening sort of automatically, is really the latest and greatest element. So let's touch a little bit on that, and then we'll pull back a bit and go into some of the fundamentals of this. But agentic applications, in traditional software, you typically have these 3 things. You have the core data that you're working with, you have some business rules that apply to that data, and then you write an application that sits on top of that and works on your phone or on a website, which calls those business rules, gets the data and presents it to you. The idea with this agentic view is that the data and the business rules are still just as relevant, but being able to expose that so that somebody else's agent can use your services directly. So using this thing called model context protocol, we won't go into the details of it, but do look it up if it's of interest to you. So MCP is really about an agent being able to ask some service what it can do for them, and then getting the information back so that it can then ask it to do those things. So for example, you might have an AI that wants to be able to browse the internet. So you might have this a model context protocol server, which knows how to browse the internet. So you could write an application or an agent that needs to browse the internet. Let's give you a real world example of this. So it's a bit far-fetched at the moment, but hopefully it gives some help into where it's going. I'm going to move house. So these days it's an absolute nightmare to do that. But why can't I ask my agent to say, I'm moving, update everybody on my new address, and then it asks me what the address is, and then because it can go away and connect to other services which are exposing those services that other agents can use, you can potentially connect and do all of the connections that you need and the changes for a move. Now, obviously, there's a lot of security and authentication and authorization that needs to go on in the process of this, and it's early days in the process. But hopefully, you can start to see that, if you're starting to build any systems in your businesses at the moment, being able to expose them through APIs, application programming interfaces, so that apps can start to use them, but also maybe exposing it in the future so that agents could start to use them as well. It's something to start considering. I want to give you another example. So this is something else we've been working on, which is in the multi-agent space. So the thinking behind it was a lot of our time is spent in things like WhatsApp groups or in Zoom calls, where you have multiple opinions in the conversation around what you're talking about. So we thought it'd be really interesting to sort of break out that kind of one-to-one AI process that you get with ChatGPT and create a room full of bots to see how that behaves and is that interesting, useful process. So let's bring that up here and see if we can have a quick look at an example of that. So the idea here is we've got a whole bunch of virtual teams. You can see a few that have been created before, and then we have a few sort of built in. So for example, if you wanted to have a strategic conversation with different AI, if you've used the 6 thinking hats process before, where each of the hats, for example, the black hat, the white hat, the red hat, they all have different perspectives and personalities, if you like, on it. So for example, the blue hat, we could look at the personality here, and it's a person with certain background information, but they have particular ways of thinking, very process-oriented thinking and planning. So we can get that perspective in the conversation. And that can be compared and contrasted with a black hat who's really looking at risks and compliance and regulatory elements of the conversation that you're having. So we can build a conversation. We can just create a team that we want to. So who do you want in the team? We could say literally anybody. Why don't we just make one up as we go along? Let's say I want a Liverpool band from the 60s. No idea if this will bring back what perhaps we're thinking, but let's give it a go. It's always fun doing live demos, isn't it? So we're generating a team, and in this case, it's going to bring back 6 characters that we can then start to talk to. So we've got we've got a few of them. We've got John and Paul and Ringo, which is good, and we've also got a couple of other people thrown into the mix as well. So we can look at their personas, but let's just use them and have a quick conversation with them. So let's have a chat with this team. And the idea here is you could have perhaps a sort of WhatsApp-like conversation with pretty much anybody. So I can say here, what was your favorite tune? Let's see what they come back with. So you can see already that the characters are seeing each other and listening to their conversations and perhaps adapting what they do. And then the other thing we've got here is a sort of immersive mode. I'm not sure these are going to look like the characters that you might expect, but we'll see what pops up. And then, of course, we can have a conversation here. So I can say, so Paul, what's your thoughts about this?
I think what makes A Hard Day's Night stand out is the way the technical aspects come together. The opening chord, which John mentioned, is a great example of this. It's a bit of a musical puzzle, using a combination of chords and melody to create.
That's a great analysis, Paul. As a music journalist, I've always been fascinated by how A Hard Day's Night encapsulates the spirit of the British invasion.
So you get the idea. I won't take you through any more of that, just given time, but hopefully that gives a little bit of a feeling of the types of conversational and engaged approaches you can have with agents. And of course, this could be anybody at any time. The main use case for this, as far as we're concerned, is one of can we use it for essentially the board you can't afford as a small or medium business? Perhaps you don't have access to full-time marketing or full-time technology or full-time finance advice, but maybe there's a way of bringing those different opinions into the room at the same time to start to enable just different conversations around things. So this, an example, your room there, but hopefully that's giving you a little bit of a feel for where things are. So I suppose where I'm sitting at the moment, we've got a whole bunch of AI opportunities that have been really well defined. So obviously there's things like, operational efficiency and marketing. So the content driving into marketing, maybe there's even simulation elements that we're starting to see, but there's still this kind of chasm of risk. So, one of those is putting AI in front of real customers is certainly a challenge still, I think. But also the agentic experiences that we're starting to see aren't really being rolled out as yet. But it's a great opportunity for if you have those sorts of opportunities to get ahead of the game in that part. So I think the field really is real at the moment. People are really still worried about what the effect of jobs is going to be with this. It's just even as a co-pilot in supporting jobs, what effect is it going to have on people? Connecting AI systems up to your data, is that potential exposing data out there? And even if you did that, can you take the reputational risk of putting something out there that could say something that you're not quite happy about it saying? Now, of course, a lot of businesses take risks in all of these ways anyway. Retail, putting 16-year-olds with little training on a shop floor for some big brands could be huge reputational risk. And is the AI even bigger than that? I think it's hard to gauge. There's certain very specific circumstances where it's relevant, and also being able to measure the ROI on it. I think at the moment the clear direction now is that everything is getting faster and cheaper, and actually the ROI. Well, I'll come on to the ROI because I think it's a key question. The fundamental piece around all of that kind of AI and the usage of it is data. So I want to take a little bit of a diversion into data because it's absolutely essential to get it right. Again, there's a little workbook here that we've done, which perhaps you can use afterwards just to get some ideas of how to look at data. So please feel free to download that and use it. But you've kind of got two elements around data with things like the foundation models. So are you going to use data that other people have created and the environment's been trained on, or are you going to create applications and data sets and AI that's specifically your own, that you've tuned to answer your specific problems? So the latter one, sovereign AI, is essentially, great advantages by you being able to collate data, tune it exactly to your very specific needs, but it's incredibly expensive to do. And in fact, most even medium or large businesses are going to struggle to do that effectively. The second part is the foundation model, which is where we are using it, but we're using somebody else's model that's been trained on the data in the internet. But of course, it's not exclusive. Anybody could get similar, based on the prompting that they do, similar outputs to you. So there's a little bit of middle ground around this where you can upload your own content into the foundational models to supplement that. So you might have come across a term called RAG. So RAG is really about being able to take content in PDFs or spreadsheets or Word documents or whatever you have to hand, be able to upload those and then be able to use those as part of the communication that you have with the AI. So fundamentally, to do your own model, I mentioned you need lots and lots of data. You've got to be really consistent in that data. So the idea of having huge amounts of data and it all being really well structured, most businesses really struggle with that. And of course, having a single source of the truth of that data integrity can also be a huge challenge as well. So I think we'll see not that many sort of small language models that are very focused on particular scenarios, much more sort of tuning the large language models to what you need. Let me give you an example of this data problem that we have here. So when I ask this to audiences where I can get sort of immediate feedback, typically I typically get that this is when I say cat or dog, most people tell me it's a dog, but not everybody, probably 2/3, 1/3. And I think this is a great example where we, as our own neural networks, probably don't have enough information, or some maybe do, to be confident this is one or the other, and others don't. So let's talk about that process. So we need the data to be able to train a model. And in order to train a model, we need to take a subset of the data, all the data that we have, and use that for training. So typically you might take half of the data set that you have and say that's going to be our training data set. And then you create this neural network. And I won't go into all the details of this, but fundamentally the neural, think of it as there's some inputs. This is a picture of that cat or dog at the start. And then there's an output layer, which is this is a cat or this is a dog. It's that determination of a result. And then in between, there's all sorts of other layers of information. Does it have pointy ears? Is it furry? Has it got a tail? Etc. etc. I've made this a lot simplified. There might be thousands of layers in here, and then all the lines between these are all probability weightings. So in order to get from this particular picture of that cat or dog through this neural network, we'll take loads of different paths with loads of different probabilities of one thing to the next till we get out to an answer. And then sometimes we know that's wrong. So if we know categorically that that is a cat, then we can say it is a cat and then come back, this idea of back propagation, to come back and tune the model to say it's absolutely now this is a cat. Where did it go wrong in the detection? Let's tweak that probability a little bit to get there. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a feel. In order to get that training to work at sufficient detail, you need huge amounts of data to go forward in the process, and then a huge amount of data to test and back propagate with to be able to deliver that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the pitfalls of AI, where we see them at the moment. So one of those is definitely around the stability of everything. It's in 30 odd years of building technology solutions, I've never seen technology moving this fast. I'm sure I'm getting a bit older and a bit slower in the process, but at the same time, literally, where we would see, a few months between changes in technology, we're seeing a few days sometimes, and it's incredibly hard to keep up with what really is the state of the art with this. So, today's answers that you have might be different to tomorrow's. The model that you're choosing to use because it's got the right sort of mix may well be deprecated tomorrow and not available. All of those things are happening in the environment. So it's worth thinking in a very sort of flexible and versatile way. So for example, with that, with Portrait, with the talking characters, we've designed that so that you can just plug in any of the large language models. So any new speech to text or text to speech or large language model, we can just plug in the latest and get it going within the next day. And that way of thinking of where you're building applications and workflows, I think is really important for where we are at the moment. Transparency is another huge thing at the moment. I mentioned it at the start, but this whole business of something not being deterministic can be a huge problem. It's a kind of a black box that you put some inputs in, it spits some outputs out, but you've got no idea how it came by the decisions to do that. There's no traceability or auditability in the process. And obviously certain industries that you may be in that are highly regulated, for example, are going to have real challenges with not being able to audit where data has been flown from. That said, I think there's real opportunities still around those areas that you can do. And also, it's also worth thinking that not every problem is solved by AI. So quite often there's traditional computing and ways of getting data and structuring data can be just as useful now, and maybe using some AI to present that in some useful ways is how you get around that. Security is obviously really, really important around building any kind of applications. We're seeing a lot of people talk about vibe coding these days. So the idea with that being able to create applications yourself, not having to go to software developers and designers like ourselves, but to be able to do it for yourself and create applications. And I have to say, some of the outputs are absolutely incredible. And some of the tools that have been created to do that are astonishing. There's challenges in some cases with some tools where, for example, they're building a great application for you and it's really fast, but actually it leaves the keys to your large language model out in the open where anybody can find it. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment to try and make sure that that kind of security glitches aren't being dealt with. But I think it's really important if you're building or using any of this technology to make sure that you really understand what you're using, how it's using the data, how it's allowing the data to be exposed in different ways. And of course, then there's the ethics side of things. Creating a Barack Obama or Steve Jobs is, I think we've done it for demonstration purposes so that people could start to understand what's possible in this world, but also that you can start to create personalities that with people that you kind of expect to understand what their personality would be. Should we be doing that? I think that's going to change over, and legally we can at the moment, but it's going to change over time. And I think there's huge challenges in the whole ethics space of where data is being used, the copyright, the where people's work is being used without their knowledge and loaded up into the engines. I think we're just at the very start of some of those things, but worth you keeping a real eye on the elements that you're involved with. There's a paper here. I mentioned it at the bottom, just a reference to it, but it talks a little bit about why AI projects fail, and I think I can relate to all of these. We talked about some of them already, but things like the problem definition, focusing on the technology, not the goals. All those things are relevant. And then I just touched earlier that sometimes some things just aren't the right fit for AI. The natural route today, because of the enthusiasm and hype around it, is that so many things can be done with AI. Actually, sometimes it makes sense to not do it in AI and perhaps call it from AI, and hence the MCP, the infrastructure of being able to call agents, call things, and be able to use perhaps non-AI code to deliver those things is really important. Okay, I was going to touch on the ROI element, so let's whiz through this. But a business case rather, for using AI models. If we just look at, quite often people will talk to us. We're a B Corp. We naturally care about the applications that we're building, and also the I suppose the technologies that we use for that. ChatGPT against Google for the electricity used, you're seeing perhaps a 10 times addition over that. So they're starting to be, and that might be relevant to what you're doing. Of course, Google now in their results are populating a generative AI solution. So maybe that's less the case these days. Just to give you an idea of a kettle, so the kettle is significantly more of that, around that. So for every one kettle boil, you're going to get 50 or so ChatGPT calls and maybe 500 Google searches for the same cost basis. This is very broad figures, so just to give some concept. So of course, tea is actually the real enemy, even though I could really do with a cup right now. So let's talk about the business case. If you can roughly do 150 kettle boilings in a day, again, these numbers are, we asked ChatGPT to give us these rough numbers, so take it as you like, but I think it shows some kind of resemblance across the case. Kettle boils 150 times. A human would do 30 tasks, and averaging out at £4.50 a task, apparently. Same price, ChatGPT is doing 150,000 tasks. So where you can find those right tasks for it to be doing, there's just huge opportunity in taking that forward. So in terms of where in the business, I think you can do quite a lot beyond the content creation and management. It's still in here. It's still really relevant. Using it to write blog posts, to create content that's going to go across all the different social media platforms, to automate the processes of doing that. I think that's still going to be probably the main use case that people are doing. But actually creating personalized experiences and enhancing and monitoring things automatically, perhaps like fraud detection and those things are becoming more. I think the most important thing is at the bottom is try things out. I think where I've seen the most successes is where people have really got engaged and just had a go at something, even if it's not worked out immediately. The more you engage around it, the more you try and do some of these application areas. Certainly with partners, but certainly yourself as well. It makes sense to just get stuck in and learn from the process. let's talk a little bit about the future, and then I'll touch some prompt engineering bits, and then we should be about done. Just to give you an idea of the speed of things, I think this is a really interesting example here. So this is less than a year, and this is where we're talking about sort of video processing and where it's come on. So let's just have a quick look at this. I'm not sure how well this is going to project over Zoom. We'll see, but it's not even projecting very well for me here, to be quite honest. So there we go. It's starting to move. So something like eating spaghetti has got to be a really hard thing to fabricate and do, but we're starting to see a pretty good effect of that now. So video, I think, is an area that we really, absolutely are starting to see the next generation of. Right. So other things that I'm expecting to see, I suppose I'm thinking that well, like I mentioned, with prototyping things, that kind of idea of hyper iteration. So what used to take months taking, a few days or a few hours even, getting an idea that you might have into a kind of clickable demo or something can be easily done yourself without having to go out to designers to do that. And that's great because that enables new applications to be built in really short periods of time, to get feedback immediately on them, to understand which are good ideas and which are bad ideas really, really quickly. And I think that so tools, for example, around things like Replit and Lovable, those are great tools for kind of just creating something very, very quickly to get going. I think starting to see that kind of leaner businesses. So hopefully you saw a little bit with what we're doing with YourRoom.ai, and being able to perhaps have smaller teams where you can pull in some expertise, and maybe that's agents rather than real people. Maybe it's taking you some way towards the learning before you spend the money or the time with real people to get involved with those things. I see that's where a huge advantage is it's just taking you perhaps halfway there, 3/4 of the way there. So the money you're going to spend is much more effectively spent with real people talking about things that are really important. Patching holes, I mentioned there. We talked a bit about security, but certainly a lot of the vibe coding can cause as many problems as they're making. I think that'll improve really, really quickly though. So that's probably just a very current problem. We're starting to see this idea of people talking about SaaS products going. So if you can start to create your own CRM system, do you need to buy HubSpot, for example, or so are there opportunities to create very focused applications yourselves, where you get exactly what you need without paying that really annoying monthly fee to get that? I think we're seeing different things in investment. A lot of the companies we work with are innovating in some ways and often go for investment. I think we're going to see much smaller rounds of investment and more frequently delivered of those things. So much more akin to sort of bootstrapping new businesses is probably a much more efficient way of doing that. And I think agencies like ours kind of get into a little bit of a role of finishing agencies. So perhaps taking where people have used AI to generate those early stages, maybe it's then using experience of other software developers to build the scalable, reliable elements of that. And obviously, I think that's going to erode over time as well. But I think there's a little bit of time where finishing things is going to be a really important part of that. So my last bits and pieces here is I wanted to talk to you a few 10, 11 things that I think if you're using ChatGPT or Gemini, Claude, whatever you're playing with at the moment to do that. But the first and the most important question is, should you say please and thank yous? And of course, everybody knows that if you don't, when the AI takes over the world, we're all going to get recognized for that and do it. On the flip side, we're hearing from ChatGPT that actually just saying please and thank yous costs millions, and the environmental impact on it is significant. So I don't know. I'm going to continue to say please and thank yous just so I'm okay. Let's talk about some of the things we can do. So one of the things you can do in prompting, and I think it's really helpful, is if you don't tell it what you really, really, really want, it's going to make stuff up. So giving it do's and don'ts can be really, really helpful to set the context of what you're doing. And the more detailed that you can get with those, the better. So don't just ask a simple question, really try and say, what are the boundaries that you really want to use around it? And I think you'll get a lot better results off the back of that. Number two, so things like system prompts and user prompts are sort of segmentation of different ways of talking to the large language models. So think of system prompts as, I suppose, setting the stage. So, you're setting the AI's, the context it has, the tone it's going to use, perhaps some limitations around it. And then the user prompt part is really asking your current question around that to get a response. And then there's some settings and parameters that they're kind of hidden behind the scenes, but if you want to start looking at them, you can get some very different results off the back of it. So like temperature is a good example where it kind of, as you change the temperature number, it changes the creativity that you get in the responses that come back. And top P, so that might gives you the kind of I suppose it's like temperature, but it's sort of essentially the vocabulary, the extent of vocabulary that you're going to use. Is it that you're going to use 10% of the top most common words or whatever and drive it in that way? So maybe dig a little bit deeper in terms of some of the parameters to see what you could use. We use a lot of this in order to create the personality and the characters to try and make it sound and feel like you're talking to somebody in particular. Okay, one of the things I think you could do is ask the AI to just ask for clarifying questions. So before you do it, tell me all the things that I might want to do, and that way you can create a kind of plan that can sort of deliver the right parts with that. Okay. Next up, giving it the right sort of models for I suppose the way to think about it is that you've got a conversational pathway that you're going through. There's things that you're talking about in the questions that you ask, and you're getting answers. But of course, quite often you would just ask, if it wasn't quite what you wanted, you'd ask something again. But most people don't know that you can go up and edit the message, so you don't have to kind of just keep reiterating in full verbose language for this. You can go and change the message and resubmit it, and hopefully that can really be helpful sometimes. Okay, next up. Why not tell it what you want in terms of a desired outcome? Examples are really, really helpful. So yes, ask it the question, but if you know kind of the thing that you want to get back, tell it that as well, and it's going to give you a much better result for that. Getting it to do several answers and then do some critical analysis of each of those answers can be incredibly helpful for certainly if you're in that kind of market research, those sorts of stages to deliver it. So I think just asking it to give you multiple ideas and then describe why it's chosen one and to pick something itself. Next up, I've got the OpenAI cookbook as a reference here, but all of the different large language models that you do all have their own prompting guidebooks. So hunt out those because they'll tell you the nuances of a particular engine and how to do that. This one I think is really approachable. It's all web-based. You can go and ask it information about different, certainly around ChatGPT and how to engage most effectively with it. Here's one which is again, certainly for content creation that I find really interesting and useful is that you might have your article that you've written yourself, or maybe even got some content generated for you. But actually, how do you present that in a way that is as engaging for the particular audience that you want? So one of the things you can do is essentially pick like an anonymous celebrity tone of voice. So you can tell it to give it to you in somebody's tone of voice. And in this case, we did Jimmy Carr, and so taking that same bit of content and projecting it through somebody else might be a great way to start to engage an audience in some way. And again, nobody needs to know that you used a particular character or celebrity to do this. It'll just perhaps bring some of the content that you have to life. Right. So one of the best things about LLMs is they write language. So probably the best prompt engineers are LLMs themselves. So why not get ChatGPT to prompt, so to write the prompt for something itself? It can be really, really effective. So the example outcome here is, this is the prompt that's come back. You can then take that and edit it and create your specific details and then submit that, and you're probably going to get a better result overall coming through. Of course, there's sometimes when just using the generic AI large language models aren't the best. So sometimes there's tools that have been created, and we touched on some of those like Zapier and NN and Move, and Make.ai. But there's, in all different areas, there's a whole set of different tools that are really designed for particular jobs. So LinkedIn, X have endless lists with people posting these. So go hunting on those and try and find which are the right tools to start to use. So those are some of the kind of prompt pieces. I'm going to leave you with that there's still a bunch of things that AI is genuinely rubbish at. It doesn't know its limits. It's probably going to agree with you when you're wrong, and if you tell it that it's wrong, it'll probably agree with you that it's wrong, even if it isn't wrong. So it wants to please in the approach. One of the biggest challenges we've had with your room, having multiple AI characters involved in the same process, is getting them to argue with each other. It's really, really difficult to do that effectively. So I think bearing in mind that it may well be agreeing with your opinions is something that is worth knowing. Traditionally, they've been horrendously wrong at counting things. If you ask it to give you a list with 10 things in it, you probably won't get 10 things. If you ask it to add certain numbers together, you probably won't get the right answer. So again, there's certain use cases where traditional computing, using Excel to create calculations and then presenting that through AI could be really helpful. These are getting better, but it's still a real challenge for it. And yeah, checking its work, it's not going to do that. One of the great opportunities, I think, with agents is being able to create outputs using one agent and then maybe creating other agents whose whole role is just to check what's coming out of other agents. One of the things we did with your room was we create each of the characters that we create them all running on a different large language model. And we do that to try and create different biases where they've been trained on different data sets, that their biases should be slightly different. So when you put them into the mix of engaging with each other, you should start to be able to dilute some of that bias. But I think that's really important. But the fundamental thing, coming back to where we started, remember it's faking everything. So it's an incredible set of technologies. It can be really transformative in business, but really remember that going back to that neural network graph, all it's doing is looking at probabilities of one thing to another and trying to make that work. Brilliant. Well, thanks for joining us today. That's my rattle through of those things. Is there any questions that anybody has? I've been trying to keep an eye on the sort of the open question piece, but do throw any questions in there. And please fill out the feedback form. So it's going to be in the chat, and hopefully it allows the team to continue to deliver all the right sort of content for you. The recording and the follow-up resources, they're going to be posted on the Alumni Hub, and it's on the same web page that you used to register before this event today. And I'm going to be hanging around for a few minutes now, so if there are any other questions that anybody has, please do bring them up. Thank you very much indeed. So apologies, I'm picking up on the questions. I thought they were popping would be popping in when I was presenting, but they weren't. So apologies, everybody. I'm going to have a quick flick through and see if there's anything that there. So brilliant. So what LLMs are you aware of that offer enterprise-wide level security? Yeah, great question there. So thanks for that, Heather. So a lot of the organizations where fundamentally you're paying for the service are sitting in that thing. So for example, with the technologies that we've been building, we run those on Azure, Microsoft Azure platform, and they are fully paid enterprise accounts to deliver that. So I think yeah, it's worth you taking your own advice around particular vendors, but all of the big hosting providers recognize that this is a real fundamental problem and that they need to be able to manage that. So, but we use Azure if that helps you. Peter, yes, it was recorded. It's going to be available shortly, probably within a couple of hours, I think, after the event. So you should be able to pick that up from the same place that you registered for the event here. Great. Well, hopefully the recording's good enough for you to pick up. And yeah, do get in touch, Peter, if there's anything you want to follow up on.